For 9 months, my own father strapped steel belts around my pregnant body, trying to crush the child growing inside me. "It'll be gone before it's born," he'd say as he pulled the leather until I couldn't breathe. But when my son finally came into this world on that stormy night, Colonel Cat-Eye looked at the baby's face and ran screaming from the ranch in terror, and he never came back. Good afternoon, my dear ones. Good afternoon to all of you on the other side of this screen. My name is Helena Marie Carter, and today I am 82 years old, sweetheart. 82 years of a long road traveled, of much pain carried, but also of many victories won, thank God. I was born and raised here in Asheville, North Carolina, on a ranch far removed from the city, up in the mountains. And it's right here, in this cold and welcoming town, that I live to this day, close to my children and grandchildren. Asheville has always been my home, my piece of earth, even in the darkest times. Sometimes my grandkids come over on weekends and sit on the floor, playing with colored yarn while I work. The youngest, little Lily, is 6 years old and loves it when I make those little crocheted flowers for her to put in her school notebook. These moments are my joy, sweetheart. Seeing these children happy, free, playing without fear, that's priceless. I live in a simple little house here in the Hillcrest neighborhood, very close to the church. It's a small house, 2 bedrooms and a kitchen, but it's mine, earned with much sweat and tears. From the living room window, I can see the paved street, see the neighbors passing by, see life happening outside. And that, for me, after everything, is pure freedom. Now, before I continue telling my story, I want to make a special request to all of you. If you're enjoying this video, if you're connecting with what I'm sharing, please click that subscribe button for Grandparents' Tales and leave your like, okay? This helps so much with this work of bringing hope to other people who might need to hear that life can change, that we can overcome. And you, my dear friends who are watching me now, tell me here in the comments, what city are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? Early morning, after lunch, or in the evening when the sun is setting? I always read every comment you leave, and I get so emotional knowing where you're from and when you take time out of your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Tell me, will you? Let's create this chain of kindness. Let's unite through these words. Now, my dear ones, I need to tell you a story that I've carried for many years, locked deep in my chest. It's a painful story, one that few people know, but it needs to be told. Because if there's someone out there going through something similar, that person needs to know that you can survive, that you can start over, that you can be happy again. My story begins at the ranch where I was born, in a time when things were very different from today. And at the center of this story is a man who should have protected me, but who became my worst nightmare. I was born in 1943, right in the middle of World War II, but at the ranch we barely knew about the things happening in the world. Carter Ranch was about 15 miles from Asheville, up in the mountains, in a region of towering pine trees and fog that would descend every evening. It was a large property for raising cattle and growing timber. My father, Colonel Virgil Carter, owned all of it. He wasn't a military colonel, you see. He was a colonel of those old times, a title of power and money in the region. Everyone in Asheville knew Colonel Cat-Eye. That was his nickname, my dear ones. Cat-Eye, because my father was born with something rare called heterochromia. One of his eyes was dark brown, the color of wet earth, and the other was light green, the color of new leaves. They said he'd inherited it from his mother, my grandmother Grace, who also had eyes like that, and who had died when I was very small. I didn't really get to know her, but I heard the housekeepers whisper that her death had been strange, too sudden. But back then I was a child. I didn't understand adult conversations. The ranch house was large, made of thick timber, with a long hallway that creaked when you walked on it. There was a huge room with a stone fireplace where my father would receive other ranchers to play cards and drink whiskey. The kitchen was separate from the main house, to keep the smoke smell away from the rest of the house. And in the back were the bedrooms, 3 in total. The largest was my father's and mother's. The middle one was mine. And the smallest belonged to Betty, the housekeeper who lived with us. My mother's name was Louise. Louise Rose Carter. She was a tiny woman with delicate hands and a gentle voice. She came from a family of merchants in Asheville and had married my father when she was only 16 years old. I was an only child. I had no siblings. My mother had lost 2 babies before me, and after I was born, the doctors said she couldn't have more children. I think that's why my father always treated me differently, you know. I was his only heir, the only one who would carry the Carter name forward. When I was very young, until about 9 or 10 years old, life on the ranch was actually good, you see. My mother took care of me with all the love in the world. She taught me to embroider, taught me to make bread, told me stories of saints and angels while we peeled potatoes in the kitchen. Betty was like a second mother to me. She had a son, little Jimmy, who was my age, and we played together in the back of the house. We climbed the pine trees, even though my mother forbade it, and stayed up there watching the fog cover the valley. We gathered pine cones fallen on the ground, and Betty would roast them for us to eat warm, with coarse salt. My father at that time was a closed-off, serious man, but he wasn't bad to me. He spent all day dealing with the cattle, talking with the ranch hands, handling ranch business. When he came home at night, he'd eat dinner in silence and go to sleep. On weekends, he'd go into town to play cards with friends. He barely looked at me. I was my mother's business. But everything changed, sweetheart. Everything changed when I was 10 years old. It was in the winter of 1953, a terrible winter, with frost that killed the crops and a cold that cut through your skin. My mother started coughing. At first, it was a dry little cough, which she tried to hide with her handkerchief. But in 2 weeks, the cough got worse. Came the fever, came the blood in her mouth. Tuberculosis, they said. Back then, there was no easy cure, my dear ones. We watched people waste away until they disappeared. I remember the day my mother died as if it were today. It was a July morning. The sun hadn't even risen properly yet. I woke up to Betty's scream calling my father. I ran to their room and saw my mother in bed, pale as a ghost, her eyes closed, a trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth. Betty pulled me out, but I had seen it. I had seen my mother dead. The funeral was on a rainy Saturday. Half of Asheville came to the ranch. My father didn't cry. He stood next to the casket, with those eyes of different colors looking at nothing, his mouth closed in a hard line. I cried all afternoon, clinging to Betty's skirt. After we buried my mother in the town cemetery, my father changed, my dear ones, changed in a way that was frightening. He stopped leaving the house, stopped receiving friends, sent away most of the ranch hands. It was just him, me, Betty, and Jimmy at the ranch. The house became silent, heavy, as if there was a beast sleeping in the corners. And that's when he started looking at me differently. It was no longer that look of a father who barely noticed his daughter. It was a lingering, studied look that left me with a chill in my stomach that wasn't from the cold Asheville wind. When I passed him in the hallway, he would stop what he was doing and follow me with his eyes until I disappeared from sight. When I sat down for lunch, he would watch me chew, in silence, with that green eye and that brown eye glued to me. Betty noticed. I saw her notice. She started keeping me always close to her, in the kitchen, in the yard, washing clothes at the sink. She wouldn't let me be alone in any room of the house anymore. And when my father called Helena from the back of the hallway, Betty would run with me, always together. But an isolated ranch is one man's kingdom, my dear ones. And the king of that kingdom was Colonel Cat-Eye. There was nowhere to run, no one to ask for help. The town was too far away. And nobody questioned a colonel. I had just turned 11 when I realized my childhood had truly ended. I realized it when my father locked the ranch gate with a padlock and hid the key. I realized it when he sent Betty and Jimmy away, saying he didn't need housekeepers anymore. I realized it when he looked at me on that foggy evening and said in that hoarse voice, "Now you're going to take care of me, Helena. You're mine now." After Betty and Jimmy left the ranch, taking their little bundles of clothes and looking back with that face of someone who knew they were abandoning me in a bad place, The house changed its smell, my dear ones. It was no longer the smell of food on the wood stove, no longer the smell of bar soap from the washed clothes. It was the smell of mold, of cold ash in the fireplace, of heavy loneliness that stuck to the walls. I was 11 years old and became the only woman in that house. My father said I had to learn all the chores, that I had to take care of him now, that it was my duty as a daughter. Early in the morning, I'd light the fire, make coffee, warm the bread, wash the dishes, sweep the wooden floor, dust the furniture. In the afternoon, I'd cook lunch, wash his clothes at the sink, hang them on the line. At night, I'd make dinner, wait for him to eat in silence, and then collect everything again. But the housework wasn't the worst, sweetheart. The worst was his silent studying me. The worst were those eyes, one green, one brown, following me through every room. The worst was feeling that I was no longer the daughter. I was something else, something he thought he owned. The first bad night happened 3 weeks after the housekeepers left. It was a full moon night, so bright that it came through the crack in my bedroom window and drew a square of light on the wooden floor. I was almost asleep when I heard my bedroom door creak slowly. I opened my eyes and saw his silhouette in the doorway, standing, watching me. My heart raced. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and stayed stiff, pretending I was sleeping. He came in, closed the door behind him. And that night, my dear ones, I understood that my life would never be the same again. I understood that there was nowhere to run, no one to call, no way to scream. Because there, on that ranch lost in the mountains, Colonel Virgil was God and judge, and I was an 11-year-old girl locked in his kingdom. I won't describe what happened that night. Not that one, nor the others that came after. Not because I don't remember. I remember every second, every sound, every pain. But because there are things that our mouths can't speak, you understand? There are things that stay trapped inside here, burning, but that we can't put into words without falling apart completely. What I can say is that after that first night, he came back, and came back again, and again, and it became routine, became part of my prisoner's life. I prayed every day to Our Lady, asked her to take me out of there, asked her to make it stop. But the days passed, and nothing changed. Only me, withering inside, becoming a shadow. I grew up too fast, my dear ones. At 12, I was no longer a child. My body changed, my ways changed. I learned to walk silently through the house, not to make noise, not to call attention. I learned to cook the dishes he liked to try to keep him in a good mood. I learned to wash and iron his clothes just right. I learned that if I obeyed in everything, maybe he'd be quicker, colder, less present. There were days I'd stand looking out the kitchen window, seeing the dirt road that went down to town, and dream of escaping. I'd imagine myself running down that road, barefoot, the cold mountain wind on my face, running until I reached Asheville and asked someone for help, anyone. But I knew it wouldn't work. He would find me, and when he did, I didn't even want to imagine what he would do. Once I tried. It was on a summer day in 1956. I had just turned 13. My father had gone to town to get supplies and would be gone several hours. As soon as his truck disappeared around the curve of the road, I ran to my room, put on the least worn dress I had, put on my old boots, and left through the kitchen door. I ran down the road, raising dust. My legs were shaking. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it would come out of my mouth. I looked back every minute, afraid of seeing the truck coming back. I managed to get halfway, near that curve where there's a grotto of Our Lady. I was breathless, my legs hurting, but happy. I thought I was going to make it. That's when I heard the engine. I looked back and saw the dust rising. He had come back early, had forgotten something, or had suspected. I don't know. All I know is that the truck stopped beside me, the door opened, and he got out with a face I had never seen. It wasn't anger. It was worse. It was coldness, contempt, a certainty that I was his property and that I had tried to escape. He grabbed me by the arm, threw me inside the truck, and drove back to the ranch in silence. When we arrived, he locked me in the back room, the one we used to store tools. I stayed there 3 days, my dear ones. 3 days in the dark, with a can of water and a piece of stale bread. I learned the lesson he wanted to teach me. There was no way out, no escape. I was his. After that, I stopped trying, stopped dreaming about the road, accepted that that ranch was my prison and that Colonel Cat-Eye was my jailer and my tormentor. The years went by, 13, 14, 15 years old. I lived like a ghost inside that house, made food, cleaned, washed. And at night, when I heard my bedroom door creak, I just closed my eyes and prayed for it to end soon. There were times when he traveled to do business in other cities. He'd be away a week, sometimes 2. Those were my only moments of peace, my dear ones. I'd breathe deeply, walk through the house without fear, sleep all night without waking up startled. But he always came back. And when he came back, it was worse, as if he had saved up all the anger and desire from those days to pour on me all at once. It was during one of his absences, when I was 17, that I noticed something was different in my body. I had morning sickness. My breasts hurt. My belly, which had always been flat, was starting to swell a little. I spent a week denying it, thinking it was some disease, something I had eaten. But when my period didn't come for the 2nd month in a row, I broke down crying right there in the middle of the kitchen, holding my belly, because I knew what it meant. I was pregnant by my own father. And there was nowhere to go, no way to hide it, no way to change it. When he came back from the trip, he was going to find out, and I had no idea what was going to happen to me. My father returned from his trip on an autumn afternoon. I heard the sound of the truck coming up the dirt road, and my whole body froze. I was in the kitchen peeling potatoes for lunch, and when I looked down at my cotton dress, you could see it. The belly had grown. Not much, but you could see it. 3 months pregnant. I tried to pull my apron forward, tried to hide it, but it was useless. He came in through the kitchen door carrying a bag of supplies, threw the bag on the table, took off his hat, and looked at me. Those eyes, one green, one brown, traveled over my body from top to bottom, slowly, until they stopped at my belly. I saw the exact moment he understood. His face went white, then red, then purple with rage. "What's that?" he asked, pointing at my belly with a trembling finger. I lowered my head, unable to speak. The tears were already falling. "Answer me!" he shouted, and punched the table so hard the potato-peeling knife jumped. I'm expecting a baby, Father," I managed to whisper. The silence that came after was worse than any scream. He stood looking at me, breathing hard, and I saw fear in his eyes. It wasn't fear of me, it wasn't remorse for what he had done. It was fear of being discovered. Fear of losing his reputation, the respect that Colonel Cat-Eye had in Asheville. If anyone found out his daughter was pregnant, living alone with him on the ranch, everyone would know the truth. Everyone would know what he was. "Nobody can know about this," he said quietly, but with a hardness in his voice that cut. "You hear me? Nobody's going to know." "But Father, the baby's going to be born. I can't hide." "You will hide," he roared, grabbing me by the arm and pulling me close. That thing growing in there isn't going to be born. It won't. I'll take care of it." The next day, he came back from town with a leather bag. When he opened it in front of me, I felt my stomach turn. Inside were 3 wide belts made of thick leather and reinforced with steel rods. Corsets, but not those delicate ones that city ladies use to slim their waists. These were instruments of torture, my dear ones. They were heavy, rigid, with metal buckles and thick ropes to tighten. "You're going to wear this every day," he said, throwing one of the belts in my lap. "Morning, afternoon, night. You're going to tighten it until you can't take it anymore. and then you're going to tighten it some more. Father, for God's sake, this is going to hurt the— It's supposed to hurt, he cut me off. That's so what's in there disappears before it's born. So it vanishes. And if you don't tighten it right, I'll tighten it for you. And he did tighten it, my dear ones. That first morning, he made me take off my dress, put the leather and steel belt around my belly, and started pulling the straps. I felt the leather bite my skin, felt the steel rods press on my belly, felt my baby being crushed inside. I screamed in pain, tried to push his hands away, but he was too strong. Tighter, he said, pulling the straps hard. Tighter. What's in there is going to disappear. It'll be gone before it's born. When he finished, I could barely breathe. Every time I tried to pull in air, the belt tightened more, the steel rods dug deeper. I fell to my knees on the floor, holding my belly, crying, asking forgiveness from my child who was being crushed inside me. And that became routine. Every day, in the morning, he'd come to my room with the belt. Every day he'd tighten it, pull the straps to the last hole, tie the ropes tight. I'd beg, cry, say it was going to hurt the baby, that it was going to kill my child. But he didn't listen. Or pretended not to listen. You're going to wear this until it's gone, he repeated every day, like a mantra. Until it's gone. The days went by, and the pain got worse. My skin became marked, with deep grooves where the leather and steel pressed. My belly hurt so much I couldn't sleep. I'd lie on my side, with my hand on my belly, feeling my baby move against the iron, trying to find space, fighting to survive. Forgive me, my child, I'd whisper in the darkness of the room. Forgive me. Your mother can't protect you. Your mother can't get you out of here. I prayed every day that my baby would survive. Prayed to Our Lady, to all the saints I knew. Protect him, Mother, I'd ask. Don't let him die because of his grandfather's evil. Let him live. Please. At 5 months pregnant, I was so weak I could barely walk. The belts had left my belly all bruised, all marked. I bled sometimes, small bleedings that terrified me. But the baby kept moving, kept fighting. My son was strong, my dear ones, stronger than iron, stronger than evil. There was a night I woke up with terrible pain, a different pain. I thought I was going to lose my baby. I dragged myself to my father's bedroom door and knocked, crying, begging him to call a doctor. He opened the door, looked at me lying on the floor, writhing in pain. And you know what he said? If it dies, better. Problem solved. And he closed the door in my face. I crawled back to my room, lay down in bed, and cried until I had no more tears. But the pain passed, and my baby was still there, moving, resisting. That night I understood something. My son wanted to live. He was fighting to live. And if he was fighting, I had to fight too. 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. With each passing month, my father got more nervous, more aggressive. He didn't understand how the pregnancy was still there, how my baby was still alive after so long being crushed. He bought an even tighter belt, with more steel rods, with thicker straps. But it didn't help. My son kept growing, kept living. What kind of devil child is this that won't die? My father shouted one day, after tightening the new belt so hard I fainted from pain. When I woke up, he was sitting on the edge of my bed with his head in his hands, talking to himself. This isn't natural. It's not natural. And it wasn't, my dear ones, because my son was a miracle. A miracle who survived 9 months of torture, 9 months of iron and leather trying to erase him from existence. My baby was stronger than all that man's hatred. When there were 2 weeks left until 9 months, my father stopped tightening the belt, not because he felt sorry, but because he realized it wasn't going to work. He had failed. The creature he tried to kill was still alive, and soon it was going to be born. The first contraction came on a stormy night. It was June 1961, harsh winter in Asheville, one of those where you can see your breath turn to mist in the air and the frost burns the plants in the yard. The wind howled through the mountains, shaking the old windows of the house and making the floorboards groan as if the house itself was afraid of what was going to happen that night. I was lying in my room, wrapped in the thin blanket that barely kept me warm, with my hands on my huge belly, feeling my son moving restlessly inside. He had been agitated all day, kicking, turning, as if he knew the time was coming. I talked quietly to him, running my hand where I felt his little feet pushing my stretched skin. "Soon we'll really meet, my son," I whispered. "Soon you'll be out here in my arms." That's when the pain came. It started in my back, a strong pressure that rose, wrapping around my entire belly, tightening as if invisible hands were twisting my body. I doubled over, holding the thin mattress, biting my lip until I tasted blood. I tried to breathe like I had seen Betty do when she gave birth to Jimmy, that short, quick breathing, but it didn't help. The pain consumed everything. When it passed, I stayed there, shaking, sweating despite the cold, my heart beating so hard it felt like it would come out of my chest. Not yet, I thought, trying to convince myself. It's not time yet. Not yet. But my body knew better than my head. 20 minutes later came another contraction, stronger, longer, that pulled a moan from me, even though I tried to stay quiet, and then another and another, each one closer together. I knew what was happening. My son was coming, and he wasn't going to wait anymore. I got up from bed as I could, holding onto the wall so I wouldn't fall, dragging my heavy and sore body to the door. Each step was agony, each movement made the marks from the belts on my belly burn as if they were on fire. My legs shook so much I thought I would collapse right there in the dark hallway. I needed to call my father. As much as I hated that man with every fiber of my being, as much as I was terrified of him, I knew I was going to need help. No woman gives birth alone and survives. No woman can cut the cord, clean the baby, stop the bleeding without someone. Even knowing who he was, even knowing what he had done to me, at that moment I had no choice. I knocked on his bedroom door with a trembling hand. "Father," I called, my voice weak at first. I knocked again, harder. "Father, the baby's coming. Help me, please." I heard him move on the other side, the creak of the old spring bed, grumbles of someone woken in the middle of the night. The door opened slowly, and he appeared in a white nightshirt, his graying hair messy, with those eyes, one green, one brown, still swollen from sleep. But when he saw my state, the nightgown soaked with sweat stuck to my body, the huge belly pointing forward, my face contorted with pain, his eyes widened. Not with concern for his daughter, not with compassion. It was pure panic. Panic that what he had tried to destroy for 9 months was finally coming into the world. "Already?" he asked, his voice hoarse, almost accusatory, as if I was to blame for being in labor. "Is this thing already being born?" I could only nod before another contraction attacked me. This time it was so strong my legs buckled. I fell to my knees right there in the hallway, hugging my belly, and the scream came out without me being able to hold it. A scream of pain, of despair, of fear. He grabbed me by the arm hard, lifted me without gentleness, and dragged me back to my room, threw me on the bed as if I were a sack of potatoes. "Stay there and don't make a scene," he ordered, his voice as cold as the wind outside. "I don't want to hear screaming all night." And he left. I heard his heavy footsteps going down to the kitchen, then to the cellar. I heard him moving things, dragging metal objects, grumbling alone. I stayed there, alone in the dark, hugging myself, feeling the contractions come one after another, each stronger, each closer. When he came back, he brought a rusty iron bucket, one of those we use to feed the pigs, and some old dirty rags, the kind we use to clean the floor or dry tools. He put the bucket on the floor, right next to the bed where I could see it, and threw the rags on top of the mattress. And that was it. He didn't ask if I was in pain, didn't offer water, Didn't say he was going to get a doctor in town, or Mrs. Jenkins, the midwife who lived near the church. Nothing. He just pulled the old chair from the corner and sat there, leaning against the wall, crossing his arms, watching me with that empty expression. I understood immediately what that bucket meant. He was waiting. Waiting for all that monstrous effort of 9 months tightening iron belts to have worked. Waiting for something dead, deformed to be born, that he could throw in that bucket and take to the woods or the river. Waiting to get rid of the evidence that could destroy his name, the reputation of the powerful Colonel Cat-Eye. The hours passed, and the pain became unbearable. I completely lost track of time. It could be midnight, could be 3, 4 in the morning. I only knew that my body was being torn from the inside out, that each contraction was worse than the previous one, that I was losing blood, that I wanted to die right there just to stop feeling it. Outside, the storm had become a monster. Lightning tore through the sky, illuminating the room for seconds and showing my father's silhouette sitting in that chair, motionless like a stone statue, just watching me. The thunder was so loud, so close, that it made the window panes vibrate and the whole house shake on its foundations. It seemed like God was angry, my dear ones. It seemed like the entire sky was crying for the evil that had happened in that house. I screamed, cried, begged. "Help me, Father. Help me, please. Do something." "I'm dying." But he didn't respond, didn't move, just stayed there, watching me suffer with that coldness that was worse than any hatred. There was a moment at some point when I felt I wasn't going to make it. I felt my body giving up, my strength running out, life slipping out of me along with the blood. My vision started to darken at the edges. My breathing became weak, choppy. I heard a buzzing in my ears as if I were diving underwater. I can't take it anymore, I thought, letting my head fall on the pillow wet with sweat and tears. I can't. Better to die. Better to end this once and for all. Forgive me, my son. Your mother isn't strong enough. Your mother is going to fail you. But it was exactly at that moment when I was at my limit, when I was sure I was going to die in that bed, that I felt something. A presence. A gentle warmth that entered the cold room, a smell of lavender and homemade bread that I had known since I was little. For a second, just a second, but as real as my own body, I saw my mother. She was sitting on the edge of the bed right next to me, in that blue dress she wore on Sundays, with her hair in a bun, with that sweet and calm smile that only she had. She ran her hand over my sweaty forehead, a caress so gentle, so loving, that it made me cry even more. "Be strong, my Helena," I heard her voice clear as crystal. "Your son needs you. He's been fighting in there for 9 months. You need to fight too. Just a little more, my daughter." And I fought, my dear ones. God and my mother know how I fought. I grabbed the sheets so hard I tore the old fabric. I bit the pillow until my teeth hurt, and I pushed. I pushed with the last strength that existed in me, with every piece of life that still remained in my destroyed body. I pushed until I felt something coming out, until I felt my baby's body sliding, warm and slippery, until I felt him come out completely. And then, silence. A terrible, heavy silence that filled the room like a shroud. The baby had been born, but he hadn't cried. I raised my head, desperate, my heart stopping. "My son," I whispered. "My son, please." My father got up from the chair for the first time in hours. He approached slowly, looked at the baby that was there, between my legs, still connected to me by the pulsing cord. He bent down, picked up my son by his little feet with those big, calloused hands, lifted him upside down, shook him. Nothing. No sound. No movement. "Dead," I heard him murmur, and for the first time that whole night there was something in his voice. Relief. Thank God. It died. Finally died. My world collapsed. I had carried that baby for 9 months against all odds. Had felt him move, fight, resist the iron belts. had prayed thousands of prayers for him to survive. And now he was dead. Dead because of that man's evil. "Give him to me," I asked, extending my trembling arms, tears falling non-stop. "Give me my son. Let me hold him at least once. Let me say goodbye." But my father didn't hear me, or pretended not to hear. He turned his back, still holding my baby by the feet, walking toward that rusty bucket. He was going to throw him there. Going to get rid of the body like it was trash, as if that baby had never existed. I opened my mouth to scream, to beg, to curse, but no sound came out. My voice had died along with my son. That's when it happened. The baby let out a cry, a loud, strong, furious, indignant cry. A cry that filled the entire room, that drowned out even the noise of the storm outside. A cry of someone who had survived hell and was announcing to the whole world that he was alive. My father stopped in the middle of the room, frozen, still holding my son upside down. The storm outside stopped too, suddenly, as if even nature had held its breath to see what was going to happen. A supernatural silence fell over the ranch, and then a lightning bolt struck. So close it lit up the entire room as if it were broad daylight, so strong it made the whole house shake. And it was in that harsh, white light that my father finally turned the baby, looked at his little red face from all that crying, and let out a scream I will never forget as long as I live. A scream of absolute panic, of primitive terror, of deep psychological horror. A scream of a man who had seen something his mind couldn't process, something impossible, something supernatural. He dropped my son in my lap as if he had grabbed a burning coal, stumbled backwards, hit the wall with his back so hard that a picture of a saint fell to the floor and shattered. And he stayed there, sliding down the wall, staring at the baby in my lap, with his mouth open, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets, his face white as chalk, sweating cold even with the winter outside. "No," he whispered, his voice broken, unrecognizable. "It can't be. It's not possible. She came back." I looked at my son, trying to understand what had left that man so terrified. I picked him up in my arms carefully, cleaned his face with the edge of the sheet, and that's when I saw. My son was there in my lap, crying strongly, his little lungs working perfectly after 9 months being crushed against iron. The sound of that cry was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard in my life. It was life. It was resistance. It was victory over the death that had tried to take him even before he was born. I picked him up with both trembling hands, still weak from blood loss, and brought him closer to my face. I needed to see my son properly. I needed to know his little face, memorize every detail, every mark, because for 9 months I had talked to him, prayed for him, but had never really seen him. I took the edge of the sheet, the one that was stained with my blood and his blood, and carefully cleaned his delicate little face. I cleaned his little forehead, his flat newborn nose, his cheeks still reddened from the effort of being born. And when I cleaned his little eyes, when he opened his swollen eyelids and looked at me for the first time, my heart stopped. My baby's eyes. One eye was dark brown, deep like wet earth after rain, the color of an old oak trunk. The other was light green, luminous, the color of new spring leaves, of moss growing on creek stones. Complete heterochromia. Perfect, impossible to hide, impossible to deny. Exactly like my father's eyes, exactly like Grandmother Grace's eyes, the one I had never really known, the one who had died when I was a baby, the one the housekeepers whispered about when they thought I wasn't listening. My son had been born with the genetic mark that only one person in thousands carries. And this mark was the signature of the Carter family. It was the living, indisputable, screaming proof of who this baby's father was. Anyone in Asheville who saw those eyes would know immediately. Colonel Cat-Eye had a son, and this son had been born from his own daughter. But that wasn't what made my father scream like that. It wasn't just the panic of being discovered, of losing his reputation, of becoming the shame of the region. It was something else. Something much deeper. Something that touched the guilt, buried for decades in the rotten depths of his soul. I looked at the corner of the room where my father was huddled against the wall. The big, strong man who had always commanded everything and everyone was there reduced to a creature trembling, sweating cold, with eyes wide with pure terror. He stared at my son as if he were seeing something beyond the baby, as if he were seeing ghosts, as if he were seeing the past materialized in flesh. His lips moved non-stop, whispering words I could barely hear over the baby's crying. I brought my ear closer, trying to understand, while I rocked my son against my bare chest, feeling his warmth against my freezing skin. "Forgive me, Mother," he whispered, his voice broken, childish, unrecognizable. It was no longer the hard voice of the colonel. It was the voice of a scared boy. "Forgive me. I didn't mean to. You understand, don't you, Mother? I needed the land. I needed the ranch. The creditors were going to take everything. I had no choice. Forgive me, Mother. Don't come back. Please don't come back. Don't take me. Don't take me to hell. I beg you." And it was there, in that room still lit by the last rays of the storm moving away on that gray June dawn, that I understood everything. Grandmother Grace hadn't died of natural causes. It hadn't been disease. It hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been God's will. It had been my father. He had killed his own mother. The whispered conversations of the housekeepers suddenly made sense. The sudden death, the quick burial without a proper wake, the change in my father's behavior after that, when he took total control of the ranch, the absence of other relatives questioning the inheritance. Everything had been planned. Everything had been coldly executed. I don't know if he used poison, if he pushed her from somewhere, if he suffocated her during sleep. But he had done it. He had taken the life of the woman who gave birth to him to keep the inheritance of Carter Ranch, with the lands, with the cattle, with the power. And for over 20 years, he lived with this secret, with this rot in his soul, hidden behind the reputation of a respected colonel, a good man, a pillar of the Asheville community, until that night. Until the moment he looked into the eyes of the baby he tried to murder for 9 months and saw his mother looking back at him through the generations. Saw divine justice taking shape. Saw the ghost he thought he had buried coming back to collect the debt. "She came back," my father repeated now, louder, his voice gaining an increasingly hysterical tone. "She came back to get me, came back to punish me. The eyes, dear God, the same eyes, her eyes. How can it be? How can you be here? God help me, God help me, Holy Mary, Mother of God." He started praying, but the prayers came out all wrong, mixed with crying and delirious confessions. "Hail Mary, full of grace. I killed her, yes, but it was an accident. The Lord is with thee. No, it was on purpose. It was on purpose, yes. Blessed art thou among women. Forgive me, Mother, forgive me." He got up stumbling, his legs shaking so much he almost fell. He still stared at the baby in my lap, but now with a hatred mixed with fear, as if my son were both his victim and his executioner, as if that innocent baby carried within him all the guilt and all the punishment he deserved. "You're not a baby," he said, pointing at my son with a trembling finger. "You're her, you're my mother. You came back in this creature's body to torment me, but I won't let you. I won't." He started walking backwards, tripping over his own feet, bumping into things. The small room seemed to have gotten even smaller, the walls closing in around him. He knocked over the chair where he had sat all night watching me suffer. He tripped over the rusty bucket he had brought to throw my son's body in, and the bucket rolled across the wooden floor, making a terrible metallic noise that echoed through the empty house. "It wasn't me," he suddenly shouted, so loud it made the baby cry harder. "It wasn't me who killed you, Mother. You're lying. You're trying to blame me for something I didn't do." But then, as if his own voice had betrayed him, the truth came out unfiltered. You fell. You fell down the stairs. I just pushed a little. Just a little. You were old. You were sick anyway. You were going to die anyway. I just sped it up. For the ranch, for the family, for the Carters. It was for the family. The complete confession was there, coming out of his mouth in hysterical screams. He had pushed his own mother down the stairs of the old house, had watched her fall, break her neck, die, and had told everyone it had been an accident, that she had tripped, that it was old age, bad eyesight, weak bones, and everyone had believed it. Because who would doubt Colonel Virgil Carter? Who would dare question such a powerful, respected man? But you're here now, he continued, speaking directly to the baby, completely out of touch with reality. You came back to get me, didn't you? To drag me down there, to eternal fire. But I won't. I won't go with you. I'd rather run. I'd rather disappear. And that's exactly what he did. In a sudden movement, he turned and ran out of the room. I heard his heavy footsteps in the wooden hallway, stumbling, knocking things over. I heard him hit the doorframe in the living room, curse, keep running. I heard the front door open violently, slamming against the wall so hard the glass in the window next to it shattered. I got up from bed as I could, still holding my son, still bleeding, and went to the bedroom window. I saw my father cross the yard running, barefoot in a white nightshirt, his arms swinging uncontrolled. The storm had returned outside, a fine but steady rain that was already soaking him. "Forgive me, Mother," I heard him scream in the middle of the night, his voice breaking. "Forgive me, I didn't know you'd come back." He ran toward the gate, passed through it, and ran down the dirt road that led to town. Even from afar, even in the darkness, I could see his white figure moving away, stumbling, falling, getting up again, continuing the escape. And I could hear the screams, increasingly distant until they became just echoes in the cold night. And then, silence. Colonel Cat-Eye had fled, had abandoned his own ranch, his own house, his entire life, everything he had built on top of a murder, had fled from the baby he thought was his mother's curse coming back to take revenge, had fled from the guilt that had finally taken physical form and had looked back at him with those impossible eyes. I stood at the window for a long time, just holding my son, listening to his breathing calm down, feeling his warm body against mine. The rain kept falling outside, washing the earth, washing the world, washing all the sins of that cursed ranch. For the first time in 7 years, since my mother had died and that man had become my tormentor, I was alone, without being watched, without being controlled, without having to fear the bedroom door opening in the middle of the night. Free. I went back to bed trembling, my legs weak, but with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't happiness yet. It was relief. It was as if an immense weight had been lifted off me, as if I could finally breathe deeply after years holding my breath. The umbilical cord still connected us, me and my son. I looked at that thick rope of life that was still pulsing, pumping the last remnants of blood. I needed to cut it. I needed to separate him from me. But how? There was no doctor, no midwife, no one to teach me. I looked around the room looking for something. I saw the old knife with a wooden handle that my father had left on the bedside table. That knife he was probably going to use to cut the umbilical cord of the dead baby before throwing the body in the river. I picked up the knife with a trembling hand. I didn't know where to cut exactly, but I knew I needed to. I prayed softly, "God, help me not to make a mistake. Protect my son." And I cut. I cut the cord right in the middle, between me and him. It bled a little. I got a piece of thick thread from the drawer, the kind we used to sew flour sacks, and tied his belly button tight, like I had seen Betty do with Jimmy years ago. I tied it really tight so it wouldn't bleed. My son didn't even cry. He just looked at me with those eyes, one brown, one green, as if he knew his mother was doing the best she could. I cleaned him with the old rags, even though they were dirty, because it was what I had. I removed all the blood, all the white slime that covered his little body. He was small, smaller than I imagined a baby should be. 9 months being crushed had left him tiny, but he was perfect. 10 little fingers on his hands, 10 little toes. Little nose, little mouth, little ears, everything in the right place. I wrapped him in an old blanket and laid him next to me. I took care of myself as I could, tying rags between my legs to stop the blood that was still flowing. It hurt. Everything hurt. But it was a different pain. It was the pain of someone who survived. It was the pain of someone who won. "You're a miracle," I whispered to my son, kissing his warm little forehead. "You survived 9 months of iron trying to crush you. Survived a father who wanted to kill you. And when you were born, when you opened those eyes God gave you, you expelled the demon from our lives without needing to do anything, just existing, just being who you are." I lay on my side, pulled him closer, and for the first time in years, I slept without fear. I slept knowing that when I woke up, that man wouldn't be there waiting for me. I slept with my son in my arms, free. I woke up several times during that first night. Each time I woke up, I ran my hand over my baby's chest to feel him breathing, to make sure it wasn't a dream. And he was there, alive, warm, sleeping peacefully. The next 3 days were the strangest of my life. I was alone on the ranch with a newborn baby. I was weak, losing blood, barely able to walk. But I was the owner of my own life for the first time. I'd get up from time to get food from the pantry. There was stale bread, which I soaked in water to be able to eat. There was a piece of hard cheese. There were some potatoes. I ate everything slowly, trying to regain my strength. I drank water straight from the pitcher. I'd go back to bed and nurse my son, who nursed well, strongly, determinedly. On the second day, I managed to walk to the kitchen and make some mint tea. I drank it hot, holding the cup with both trembling hands. Through the window, I saw that my father's truck was still there, parked under the shed, but of him, no sign. On the third day, I was in the living room, sitting in the old rocking chair, rocking my son, when I heard the sound of an engine coming up the road. My heart raced. The panic came back all at once. He came back, I thought. He came back and he's going to finish what he started. I grabbed my baby, ran to the bedroom, locked myself inside. I pushed the wardrobe against the door. I stayed there, shaking, waiting to hear his footsteps, his voice, his fury. But the voice that called from outside wasn't his. "Miss Helena? Miss Helena, it's Betty. Are you there, my dear?" Betty. I removed the wardrobe from in front of the door with difficulty, opened it, ran through the house, and when I opened the front door and saw her there, standing on the porch with that worried face, I collapsed. I collapsed in her arms and cried. I cried everything I had held in for 3 days. I cried with relief, with exhaustion, with pain, with freedom, and she held me, hugged me tight, and cried with me. "Oh, my dear girl," she said, rocking me as if I were a child. "Oh, my dear Helena, what have they done to you?" She came into the house, helped me sit down, picked up my baby, and looked at him. When she saw the eyes, one brown, one green, she understood everything. I didn't need to speak. She knew. "Jesus Christ," she whispered, blessing the baby. "Jesus Christ, have mercy." She was the one who told me what had happened to my father. In the early morning of that stormy night, around 4 a.m, some people who lived near the main square in Asheville had heard screams. When they looked outside, they saw a man barefoot in a white nightshirt soaked with rain, walking in circles in the square, screaming alone. It was Colonel Cat-Eye, but he didn't look like the colonel anymore. He looked like a madman, a complete madman. He was screaming nonsense about ghosts, about his mother, about eyes that came back to get him, about having pushed someone down the stairs. The men from town tried to calm him down, but he kept struggling, saying he wasn't going to hell, that he wasn't going to let the ghost take him. They called the doctor. The doctor said it was severe psychotic episode, complete insanity, irreversible. The next day, they took him to the mental hospital in Charlotte, and there he stayed. They said he doesn't stop screaming, Betty told me in a low voice, day and night, non-stop. She came back, she's here, she's looking at me. Doesn't even recognize anyone anymore, doesn't eat properly, doesn't sleep, just screams. My father had gone completely insane. The guilt he had carried for over 20 years had finally exploded. Seeing those eyes in the baby, the same eyes of the mother he murdered, had broken his mind in a way that had no fix. "And you, my dear?" Betty asked, running her hand over my face. "How are you? Who took care of you? Who helped with the birth?" "No one," I said, my voice failing. I was alone. He was going to throw the baby in the bucket. He thought he'd be born dead. But when he was born alive, when he saw the eyes, he ran away screaming. Betty shook her head, her eyes full of tears. "God punished him," she said. "God punished him for his evil." And he had punished him. In the worst possible way. Not with death, but with madness. With the eternal torment of seeing his mother's ghost in every shadow, in every reflection, until the end of his days. Betty stayed with me, took care of me until I recovered, taught me how to properly care for the baby, helped me clean the house, make food, live again. A week after the birth, when I could walk without so much pain, she asked me, "What are you going to name him?" I looked at my son nursing at my breast, that miracle with two colored eyes, the one who had survived 9 months of attempted murder, whose simple existence had been more powerful than all the evil in the world. "Alden," I said. "His name is Alden. It means old friend and wise protector, because there's no child stronger than him. He defeated iron, defeated death, and defeated the demon. And he really had won, my dear ones." My son Alden had been born with the mark of justice on his face. Those eyes, one brown, one green, carried the genetic memory of an ancient crime. He didn't need to fight, didn't need to take revenge, didn't need to do anything. His simple existence was enough to expel that evil man from my life forever. Today I'm 82 years old, my dear ones, and I live right here in Asheville, in the Hillcrest neighborhood, in this simple little house that is my corner of peace. A lot has happened since that June night in 1961 until today. A lot of water has passed under the bridge. But I survived, my son survived, and we built a good life, honest, full of love. Soon after Betty arrived and helped me recover from childbirth, I made the most important decision of my life, to sell Carter Ranch. I couldn't stay in that place anymore, my dear ones. Every room in that house held a bad memory. Every floorboard creaked with the weight of suffering. That land was stained with blood and sin. In 1962, I sold the ranch to the neighbor, Mr. Otis, who had always wanted to expand his lands. I took the money from the sale. It wasn't much, but it was enough, and moved to the city of Asheville with my son Alden and with Betty, who never abandoned me again. I bought a small house here in Hillcrest, near the church, on flat land where there was no memory of pain. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a little backyard. It was all I needed. It was freedom. It was a new beginning. My father died in 1965, still hospitalized in that facility in Charlotte. He never came to his senses again. He spent 4 years screaming day and night, seeing ghosts, reliving the guilt. When they told me about his death, I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger either. I just felt a deep relief, as if the last thread that tied me to that time had finally been broken. I raised my Alden with all the love I had stored in my chest. Betty helped me with everything, was like a real grandmother to the boy. She taught him to walk, to speak his first words, spent hours playing with him in the yard. When he started to grow and other children asked about his different eyes, One brown, one green. I would say, that's how God made him. And God doesn't make mistakes. Some people found it strange at first. Some remembered Colonel Cat-Eye and did the math. But I never hid it. I held my head high and moved forward. My son wasn't to blame for anything. He was pure. He was innocent. He was a miracle. Alden grew up strong, healthy, hard-working. He studied at the public school here in Asheville until he finished elementary school. Then he started working as an assistant in a carpentry shop, learning the craft of making furniture. He had a knack for it. His hands were skilled, careful. When he turned 25, he met Carmen, a good girl, daughter of a shopkeeper here in town. They liked each other, dated properly, and got married in the church. I cried so much at that wedding, my dear ones. I cried with happiness to see my son happy, free, building his own family without carrying the weight I carried. Alden and Carmen gave me 3 grandchildren, Robert, Patricia, and the youngest Maurice. And Patricia, my middle granddaughter, gave me Lily, my 6-year-old great-granddaughter who is the light of my eyes. When this little girl comes to my house on weekends and climbs on my lap asking me to make little crocheted flowers for her, I thank God for letting me live to see this. Betty passed away in 2010, at 89 years old, sleeping in her little bed, peacefully. We buried her here in the Asheville Cemetery with all honors. She was the one who taught me what real motherly love was. She was the one who showed me that family isn't just blood. It's who stays. It's who cares. It's who loves without asking anything in return. After she passed, I stayed alone in this little house, but alone only in living, because my son comes to see me every day, every single day, without fail. He stops by in the morning before going to the carpentry shop, has coffee with me, asks if everything is okay, if I need anything. On Sundays, the whole family comes for lunch here. Carmen brings the food ready because she doesn't want to see me working too much, but I insist on making at least the dessert. A dulce de leche, a rice pudding, those things you learn from making your whole life. My routine is simple and peaceful. I wake up early, make my coffee with homemade bread I buy from the bakery on the corner. I sit in the blue armchair in the living room, the one my son gave me as a gift, and pick up my crochet. I stay there all morning, making doilies, little rugs, those little decorative things that the neighbors order. It's not to make money, you see. It's because I like it. It's because my hands need to create beautiful things after everything they've been through. In the afternoon, sometimes I go to church to say a prayer. I always give thanks. I thank for having survived. I thank for my son, for the grandchildren, for the great-granddaughter, for the simple but dignified life we've conquered. Sometimes, when I'm alone here at home and I look out the window seeing the paved street, the neighbors passing by, the children playing, I remember that isolated ranch. I remember that room where I suffered so much. I remember the iron belts, the pain, the fear. But I don't get stuck in those memories, sweetheart. I look at them like someone looking at a storm that has passed. Did it hurt? It hurt. Did it leave marks? It left marks. But it passed. And most importantly, I won. I won because I survived. I won because I raised my son with love and dignity. I won because I didn't let that man's evil destroy the good I had inside me. I won because today I am free. Truly free. My son Alden, this 64-year-old man who works every day at the carpentry shop, who takes care of his family with love, who has never raised his voice to anyone, who respects his wife and children, he is my victory. He is proof that love conquers hate, that life conquers death. That good, in the end, always conquers evil. Today, when I hold my great-granddaughter Lily in my lap, and she looks at me with those curious little eyes and asks, "Grandma, tell me a story." I tell beautiful stories. I tell about brave princesses, about heroes who defeat dragons, about happy endings. Because she doesn't need to know about the darkness I lived through. She only needs to know about the light we conquered. And that light is real, my dear ones. that light exists. It's here, in this humble little house in Hillcrest, in Asheville, North Carolina. It's in my crochet, in my grandchildren's hugs, in the coffee my son has with me every day. It's in my freedom to open the window when I want, to go out on the street when I want, to sleep in peace knowing that no one will open my bedroom door in the middle of the night. This is my life today, and I'm grateful for every second of it. My dear ones, if you've made it this far and heard my whole story, I want to tell you something. You are not alone. If you're going through something similar, if you're trapped somewhere, if someone is hurting you, if you think there's no way out, listen to what this 82-year-old grandma has to tell you. I thought I was going to die on that ranch. I thought I would never be free. I spent years believing that was my life, that there was nowhere to run, that no one would help me. But I survived. And if I survived, you can too. For 9 months, that man tried to crush my son with iron and leather, tried to make him disappear before being born. But my baby resisted. Every day he stayed alive in there, even being crushed, was a victory. Every beat of his little heart against those belts was a shout of, "I will live." And he lived. Against all odds, he lived. I learned something on that stormy night when my son was born. Justice comes in ways we don't expect. I didn't need to take revenge. I didn't need to do anything. My son opened his eyes, those eyes that were the mark of buried guilt, and that was enough to expel the demon from my life. Truth has a power we can't imagine. Light always conquers darkness, even when it takes time. If you're going through this, seek help. In every country, there are authorities and organizations ready to protect you. Talk to someone you trust, a neighbor, a teacher, a religious leader, someone. Don't carry this weight alone. You deserve to live free. You deserve to be happy. No matter what they told you, no matter how many times they made you believe you're worthless, that's a lie. You're worth it. Your life is worth it. I spent years thinking I was weak, that I was a coward for not being able to escape. But today I know that surviving was already resisting. Every day I woke up on that ranch, that I took care of my baby despite the belts, that I prayed, asking for strength, that was already courage. You who are enduring, who are surviving, you are already brave. You are already strong. Freedom exists, my dear ones. It really exists. Today I wake up every day, open my window, breathe deeply, and give thanks. I thank for having survived. I thank for my son, who gave me 3 beautiful grandchildren and a great-granddaughter who is my joy. I thank for the simple but dignified life we built. And you will also reach that day, the day you'll breathe free and thank for having resisted. Don't give up. Never give up. The storm passes. The night ends. The sun always rises again. And now, my dear ones, I need to make a request from the bottom of my heart to you who have listened to me until here. If this story touched you, if you felt something, I ask you, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales and activate the notification bell now. It's very important. Because there are many people suffering like I suffered, many people thinking there's no way out, and these stories of overcoming can save lives. They can give hope to those who have no hope. They can show that you can start over. And leave me a comment down below with the word resistance. Just that word. Whoever watched until the end, whoever heard my whole story, comment resistance. I want to know how many people believe we can resist and win. I read every comment, every word you leave here. And that gives me strength to keep telling these stories. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. Subscribe, activate the bell, comment resistance. For you, for me, for everyone who is still fighting to break free. May God bless each one of you. May God give you strength, courage, and freedom. And remember, you are stronger than iron. You are stronger than evil. You will win. A kiss in all your hearts. Until the next story. Tentar novamente o Claude. Pode cometer erros. Confira sempre as respostas. On my honeymoon, I discovered my stepfather had installed cameras in my bedroom and bathroom. He texted, "I'm watching everything." I panicked. And the trap I set for him was brilliant. "Hi, my dear ones. Hi, my darlings. It's so good to have you here with me today. Come on in, have a seat, make yourselves comfortable because this house is yours too. I'm Helen Cordwell. I'm 72 years young, and I live here in Hot Springs, Arkansas, in a cozy little house that's close to the thermal baths. I was born and raised right here, in this blessed city known for its healing waters, and this is where I came back to spend my days in peace after everything I've lived through, honey. You know what I'm doing right now while I talk to you? I'm here in my warm kitchen, making my homemade caramel sauce that everyone asks for. The sweet smell is already filling the whole house, that wonderful aroma that clings to the curtains and makes everything feel like home. I'm stirring slowly in the copper pot that belonged to my grandmother, that wooden spoon making that lovely sound against the bottom of the pan. I learned to make this sauce from my mother, sweetheart, when I was just a little girl who could barely reach the stove. She'd put me on a wooden stool and say, "Pay attention, Helen, because one day you'll need to know how to do things with your own hands." I started selling my caramel sauce after I retired, you know? Not because I need the money, thank God, but because it makes me feel good to have something to do, to have people coming to my house, chatting, taking a jar home for their family. Every Saturday morning, my kitchen becomes a meeting place. People come from far away just to get the sauce and spend a few minutes talking with me. I wrap each jar carefully, tie a red ribbon around it, and hand it over with all my love. My grandkids love helping me. They sit at the kitchen table, sticking on the labels we make on their computer, all neat and pretty with my name and phone number. The house here is simple, but it's cozy. I have my plants on the porch, my embroidered dish towels that I make myself, and that living room sofa that's a bit sunken from all the grandkids jumping on it, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. On the living room wall, there are photos of the whole family, my 3 children, my 6 grandchildren, my husband Philip, who's been by my side for 50 years. It's a good life, honey, a peaceful life that I built after so much struggle. And look, before I continue telling my story, I'd like to ask you all a little favor. If you're enjoying listening to me, click that like button down there for me, okay? And subscribe to Grandparents' Tales, hit that bell, because I have so many more stories to tell. You won't want to miss them, I guarantee it. And tell me in the comments, what little town are you watching me from? From what corner of the United States, or even from outside the US, are you giving me the joy of listening? And tell me too, what time is it where you are? Did you catch this video early in the morning with breakfast steaming on the table? Or is it in the afternoon, after lunch, during that rest time? Or is it already nighttime when the house is quiet? I read all the comments, you know, every single one, and I'm so happy to know there are people from all over the country and even from other countries who take time out of their day to sit and listen to this grandma. Tell me, sweetheart, okay? Let's make a chain of love that crosses cities, states, even oceans. Now, my dear ones, I need to tell you a story I've been carrying for a long time. A story that begins back in my youth when I was 22 years old and preparing for my wedding. A story about broken trust, about a moment that should have been the happiest of my life, but turned into a nightmare. But it's also a story about intelligence, about courage, and about how sometimes we need to be smarter than those who try to harm us. To understand what really happened, I need to go back to the beginning, when I was still a little girl here in Hot Springs. My father's name was Walter Cordwell, a tall man with big, calloused hands who worked as a construction foreman here in Hot Springs. He built beautiful houses for the tourists who came for the thermal waters, but we lived in a simple 3-room house on the street behind Main Street Methodist Church. I remember the smell of cement he'd bring home on his clothes, the way he'd lift me up even when he was tired and dirty from the sight, and that deep laugh of his that filled the house with joy. I was only 7 years old when he fell from scaffolding that gave way. It was on a Saturday afternoon in late 1960. My mother, Hortense, became a widow at 32, with 3 young children to raise. There was me, my older sister Yvonne, who was 11, and my little brother Gerald, who was only 4 years old. Our house was one of those old hot springs homes with hardwood floors that creaked when we walked barefoot, a roof that got too hot in summer, and a kitchen with a wood stove that my mother lit every day before sunrise. We had a small backyard where my mother planted collard greens, okra, and some tomato plants. In the back, there was a persimmon tree that bore sweet fruit every year, and it was under that tree that my siblings and I played house, hide and seek, and hopscotch drawn in the dirt. My mother was a seamstress. After Daddy died, she turned the front room into a workshop. She bought a used Singer sewing machine and started sewing for others, party dresses, christening gowns, even school uniforms. I'd sit on the floor watching her work that machine, the rhythmic sound that made me sleepy, the colorful fabric scraps she'd give me to make little dolls. Yvonne helped by taking care of Gerald and cooking, because my mother would be there sewing from morning to night, her thin fingers full of needle pricks. Life was hard, honey, but it was an honest hardship, you know? We ate beans and rice and eggs every day. Sometimes we didn't even have meat. But we had love. We had each other. I went to public school in the morning, came back for lunch, and in the afternoon I'd help my mother thread needles because her eyes were already tired. In the evening, we'd sit on the front porch watching the street activity, neighbors passing by, the ice cream truck with its jingling sound, the young ladies going to evening service at church. I had my girlfriends from school, Teresa, Nadine, Zelda, and we'd play Ring Around the Rosie in the park, with rag dolls, singing those old songs that nobody knows anymore today. On weekends, when we had a little money, my mother would take us to bathe in the public thermal baths. We'd get into that warm water that smelled of sulfur and stay for hours, because it was free and it was the only outing we could afford. It was on a Sunday in 1963, I was 10 years old, when my mother came home with a man beside her. It was after the 10 o'clock service, and she came with a different smile on her face, kind of shy. "Children," she said, "this is Mr. Roger Meadows. He's an engineer. He worked with your father, used to work with your father, at the same construction company." Roger was an elegant man, much taller than my mother, hair combed with pomade, clothes always pressed, shoes polished. He had a brand new blue Volkswagen Beetle that he parked right in front of our house, and that caught the attention of the whole neighborhood because nobody on that street had a car. I remember he bent down, gave me a lollipop, and said in that deep voice, "You must be Helen. Your mother talks about you a lot." At first, I thought it was strange. We were still in mourning for my father, and suddenly there was this man showing up every Sunday, taking us for ice cream downtown, bringing presents. But my mother was different. She was lighter, laughed more, and for the first time since Daddy died, I saw her wearing lipstick. Yvonne was suspicious, would whisper to me, "This man appeared too quickly, Helen. What interest does he have in Mother? She has nothing." But I was a child, I wanted to see my mother happy, and Roger was polite, kind, always bringing something. 6 months later, they got married. It was a simple ceremony at the church, and Roger moved into our little house. But we didn't stay there long. He said he was going to take proper care of his family now, and 2 months later, we moved to a big house on the other side of town, near the Arlington Hotel, in an area where only wealthy people lived. The house had 4 bedrooms, a bathroom inside the house with a bathtub, a dining room separate from the living room, a yard with trimmed grass. It was another world, my dear. Roger paid for a private school for me and Yvonne, a Catholic school where the daughters of doctors and rich merchants studied. He bought us new clothes, leather shoes, first-class school supplies. My mother stopped sewing for others and became a housewife, as he said. He even hired a lady to come clean twice a week. On the outside, everything seemed perfect. The poor family that had gotten lucky, the widow who had found a prince charming. But inside the house, little by little, I began to notice things. Roger was controlling. He decided everything. What clothes my mother would wear, what food we'd have for lunch, what program we'd watch on the new TV he bought. He didn't yell, didn't hit, but he had a way of speaking that sent chills down your spine, you know? A low voice, calm, but full of threat. Hortense, that skirt is too short for a married woman. Go change. Helen, proper girls don't stay out until this hour. Get inside right now. My mother, who used to be firm and determined, grew small, quiet. Yvonne left home as soon as she turned 18, went to live with an aunt in Little Rock and barely came back to visit. And I grew up in that beautiful but cold house, studying at the expensive school, wearing brand-name clothes, but feeling that something was wrong, very wrong, only I didn't know exactly what. The years passed, my dear ones, and I grew into a young woman inside that big house. I finished Catholic school in 1971, when I turned 18, and Roger already had everything planned. I was going to study elementary education at the State University. "You're going to be a teacher, Helen," he said with that smile that didn't reach his eyes. A dignified profession for a family girl. My mother agreed with everything he said, always bowing her head, always quiet. But it was precisely in college that I discovered freedom, and I met Philip. Philip Anderson was a tall, thin guy with round glasses who was studying electrical engineering and worked part-time in a radio and television repair shop. We bumped into each other in the university cafeteria one afternoon in March 1972. I had accidentally dropped my tray, and he helped me pick everything up off the floor. "Let me get that," he said, in that gentle way, and when our eyes met, my heart skipped a beat. We started talking every day in the cafeteria. He'd tell me about the machines he fixed, about electrical circuits, about how technology was changing the world. I didn't understand half of what he said, but I loved listening, loved seeing the sparkle in his eyes when he explained things. Philip was from a simple family, lived with his parents in a working-class neighborhood, and that made me feel close to my roots, to that little house where my father Walter still lived in my memories. 3 months later, he asked me to be his girlfriend under a dogwood tree in the university courtyard. It was in June, on St. Anthony's Day, and I said yes with my heart pounding. But then came the problem. I had to tell Roger. I remember as if it were yesterday, the day I brought Philip home for dinner. My mother made delicious fried chicken with okra, fluffy rice, tasty cornbread. Philip arrived in a pressed dress shirt, his hair carefully combed, a bouquet of flowers for my mother. He was nervous, poor thing, sweating cold. Roger sat at the head of the table, cutting his meat slowly, asking questions that seemed innocent but were full of venom. "Tell me something, son. Does your family own property?" he asked, chewing slowly. Philip answered politely, "No, sir. My father is a metalworker. My mother is a homemaker. We rent." The silence that fell over the table was heavy. Roger wiped his mouth with the napkin, looked at me with that look I already knew so well, the look of someone disapproving but wouldn't say so right then, and smiled. "I see. A hard-working young man. Very good." But later, when Philip left, Roger called me into his office. It was a closed room where he kept blueprints, engineering books, and that nobody could enter without permission. He stood in front of the window, his back to me, hands clasped behind his body. "Helen," he began in that calm, icy voice, "you know I only want what's best for you, don't you? I raised you as a daughter. I paid for your education, your clothes, everything." I stood near the door, heart racing. "I know, Mr. Roger, and I'm very grateful." He turned to me, and there was something in his eyes that gave me chills. "That boy has no future, no assets. You deserve better. You deserve someone from your social class now." But I loved Philip, honey. And for the first time in my life, I stood up to Roger. "I'm going to keep dating him, with your permission or without it. I'm already of age." I saw his jaw clench, his eyes darken. He took 2 steps toward me, and I thought he was going to hit me, but he just got very close. So close I could smell the whiskey on his breath, and whispered, "You don't know what you're doing, girl. But you'll learn." The next 2 years were of steady dating. Philip graduated in 1974 and got a good job at a telecommunications company right here in Hot Springs. I graduated in 1975 and already had a guaranteed job at a public school. In April of that year, Philip officially asked for my hand. He knelt on the floor of his parents' living room, in front of his parents, and called my mother to be present. It was simple. It was beautiful. It was the way I had always dreamed. We set the wedding for July, at the Methodist church. It would be a small ceremony, just family and close friends, and a simple reception in the church hall. We didn't have money for luxury, and that was okay. What mattered was being together, starting our life. That's when Roger completely changed his attitude. Suddenly, he became supportive. He started smiling at Philip, calling him my son, offering help. "I know I was hard on you two," he said one evening, sitting in the living room armchair, Philip and I on the couch holding hands. "But a father needs to protect his daughter, you understand. Now that I see it's serious, that you're really getting married, I want to help." Philip was happy with the change. "See, Helen? He's a good man. He was just worried about you." But I, my dear ones, I had a tightness in my chest that I couldn't explain. I had known Roger for 12 years. I knew he never changed his mind like that from one moment to the next. But I didn't say anything, because I didn't want to ruin my fiancé's happiness. It was 3 weeks before the wedding that Roger made the offer. We were at the dinner table on a Friday night. He cleared his throat and announced solemnly, "Helen, Philip, I want to give you a special wedding present. I have a cabin in the mountains near Gatlinburg, a private place, just mine, that nobody uses. I want you to spend your honeymoon there. A whole week, everything paid for, everything prepared. It's the least I can do for my daughter." Philip's eyes widened. "Mr. Roger, that's too much. We can't accept—" But Roger raised his hand, interrupting. "I insist. Everything's already arranged. The cabin is secluded, has a beautiful view, fireplace, everything you need to start married life right. You deserve it." He looked at me, and I swear, my dear ones, I swear I saw something in that look that made me want to scream no. But how could I explain? How could I tell my fiancé that I didn't trust the man who had raised me, who had paid for my education, who was now being so generous? My mother clapped, excited. "How wonderful, Helen! What a helpful father-in-law you found for Philip, my daughter." And Philip squeezed my hand under the table with that wide smile of someone who had just won the lottery. I smiled too, but inside something screamed that this was wrong. Roger never did anything for free. Everything had a price. Everything had a reason. And while he described the cabin, it has a bathroom with a whirlpool tub, spacious bedroom with fireplace, equipped kitchen, everything brand new. I renovated it last year. I saw the gleam in his eyes, that gleam I had seen before when he looked at Yvonne's friends, when he would accidentally walk into the bathroom when I was showering and pretend he had forgotten to knock. But I swallowed that fear. I was 22 years old, in love, about to marry the love of my life. What harm could there be in accepting a gift? Everyone accepts wedding gifts. It was normal. It was common. I was being paranoid, that's all. "I accept, Mr. Roger," I said, forcing my voice to come out firm. "That's very generous of you." And I saw his smile widen, his eyes shine even more, and he raised his wineglass in a toast. "To the newlyweds, may you have an unforgettable honeymoon." Unforgettable. He said unforgettable. And sweetheart, if he only knew how true that word would be, in the most horrible way possible. The wedding was beautiful, my dear ones. It was on a Saturday in July the 19th, 1975. The Methodist church was decorated with white flowers, the afternoon sun coming through the stained glass windows, and when I walked in on Gerald's arm, my little brother who was already a 19-year-old man, I saw Philip waiting for me at the front with that emotional smile, and I thought nothing bad could happen. Roger was sitting in the first row, next to my mother, all elegant in a gray suit, and when I passed by him, he gave me a smile that at the time seemed like paternal pride. How naive I was, dear God. The reception was simple, but full of love. We danced, ate cake, took photos with those old cameras that took forever to develop. And when night fell, we said goodbye to everyone and got into Philip's old Volkswagen, which his friends had decorated with noisy tin cans tied to the bumper. Roger came to the car, handed Philip the cabin keys, and held my hand through the window. "Enjoy every second," he said, squeezing my fingers hard. "You deserve it." The road to Gatlinburg was narrow and full of curves going up the mountain. It took us almost 3 hours driving in the dark, just the Beatles' lights illuminating the wet asphalt. It had rained in the afternoon. But when we arrived, the cabin took our breath away. It was a wood and stone construction, isolated in the middle of the woods, with a deck that overlooked fog-covered mountains. It smelled of wet earth, of pine, that deep silence that only exists far from the city. "It's beautiful," I whispered, and Philip picked me up to carry me through the door, the traditional way. We laughed, we kissed, and I thought, this is where my real life begins. Inside, everything was brand new as Roger had promised. Leather sofa, stone fireplace, plush rugs, kitchen with modern refrigerator full of food someone had left prepared. And the bedroom. The bedroom was spacious, with a huge bed with white sheets, nightstands on each side, a large mirror on the wall, and that modern smoke detector on the ceiling with a blinking red light. We made a simple dinner, opened a bottle of wine that was in the fridge with a card. For the newlyweds, RM. We ate in the small living room with the fireplace lit, talking softly, laughing nervously, because we were young and alone there for the first time, away from everyone. The wall clock showed almost midnight when we went to the bedroom. I had worn a red nightgown that I had bought especially, something delicate, beautiful. Philip turned on a lamp that left the room in a pleasant dimness. We kissed slowly, with that mix of love and nervousness of people starting a life together. I remember thinking, this is the happiest moment of my life. I remember the smell of his cologne, the heat from the fireplace reaching the bedroom, the sound of the wind outside in the trees. And then, honey, then came hell. My cell phone, one of those old big ones that almost nobody had at the time, but Philip had gotten from the company, was on the bedside table. It vibrated, once, twice, 3 times, messages arriving. Philip stopped, looked at me. "Who's sending messages at this hour?" We thought it was strange, but I picked up the device to see. When I read the first message, my whole body froze. The number was unknown, but the profile picture, I recognized it. It was a photo Roger used in a work group, an old photo of him younger, and the message said, "The red nightgown looks beautiful on you, Helen. You can continue. I'm watching everything." I couldn't breathe. I showed Philip with my hand shaking so much I almost dropped the phone. He read it again, and his face went pale. "What the hell is this?" He jumped out of bed, started looking around the room like a caged animal. "He's watching. How is he watching? Where's the camera? Where's the camera?" The second message arrived. "Don't stop on my account. I'm loving the show." I felt nausea rising up my throat. I grabbed the sheet and covered myself completely, curled up in the corner of the bed and started crying in that desperate way, without control. Philip was pulling pictures off the wall, moving vases, searching like crazy. Son of a bitch," he repeated, his voice choked with rage and disgust. He was the one who found the first one. In the smoke detector on the ceiling, he dragged a chair over, climbed up, and when he removed the cover, there it was, a small black camera with a shiny lens pointing directly at the bed. My stomach turned. Philip came down holding that thing, his hand trembling with so much anger, and smashed it on the floor, stomped on it until it turned to dust. But then we started looking for more. And there were more. There was one behind the mirror. We discovered it was a 2-way mirror. You could see through to the other side. There was another inside the lamp. And in the bathroom, my God, in the bathroom there was one behind the shower vent, pointed where a person would stand. I threw up. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left inside me, just bitter bile. Philip came after me, held my hair, and we stayed there on the cold bathroom floor, hugging, crying. I felt dirty, sweetheart. Dirty like I had never felt in my life. That was supposed to be the most special day, the most intimate, most sacred moment. And that monster I had called father for 12 years, had turned everything into his own private show. "We're leaving now," Philip said, trying to get up. "We're going to the police. We're going to report this bastard." But I held his arm, because in that moment, in the middle of all that horror, a crystal clear thought crossed my mind. If we ran away now, Roger would have time to erase everything. He was rich, influential, had connections. He'd say we were crazy, making up stories. He'd sue us for defamation. And he'd get away with it, free to do this to someone else. "No," I said, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. "We're not running away." Philip looked at me as if I had gone crazy. "Helen, we can't stay here, not after this." But I was already thinking, already remembering all the times Roger had manipulated me, manipulated my mother, controlled us. Already feeling that anger growing inside me, so big it suffocated the fear. "He thinks he's smart," I said, my voice coming out firmer. "He thinks we're going to run away, terrified. And then he'll erase the evidence and laugh in our faces." I stood up, washed my face, and looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red from crying so much, but there was something new in them, iron determination. "But we're not running away, Philip. We're going to give him exactly what he wants. We're going to give him a show, and it'll be the last show that bastard watches before going to jail." Philip stared at me, processing. How? How do we do this? And that's when, my dear, I began to put together the most important plan of my life. The plan that would turn the worst day into revenge. We spent that night awake, my dear ones, sitting on the cold living room floor, away from the bedroom that now seemed contaminated, dirty, defiled. Philip had ripped out all the cameras we found and put them in a plastic bag, 4 in total. But we weren't sure if those were all of them. That whole cabin seemed to have eyes now. Every dark corner, every little hole in the wall, every decorative object could be hiding another lens watching us. It was as if the walls themselves had become enemies, as if even the air we breathed had been violated. I stayed wrapped in a blanket, shivering even with the heat from the fireplace. It wasn't cold from the body. It was cold from the soul, that kind of cold that comes from inside, and that no flame can warm. My teeth chattered. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Philip paced back and forth like a caged animal, hands clenched in fists, jaw locked so tight I could see the muscle pulsing on the side of his face. The wooden floor creaked under his feet with each step, forward, backward, in a desperate rhythm that echoed the chaos inside us. Every now and then, he'd stop in front of the fireplace, look at the fire, and I knew he was imagining terrible things. Then he'd turn and look at me with those eyes full of unshed tears and a rage so deep it seemed to burn, and I saw he was blaming himself, torturing himself. "I should have suspected," he repeated for the 3rd, 4th, 5th time, his voice getting hoarser. "That gift was too good, too generous. I should have said no, should have noticed something was very wrong." "Stop," I said, and my voice came out so firm it even surprised me. The sound echoed off the cabin's wooden walls. "Stop blaming yourself. You're not to blame for anything. I didn't see it either. Nobody saw it, because we trusted. Because we're good people, decent people who can't imagine someone capable of something like this." I got up, let the blanket fall to the floor, and went to the window. My bare feet were freezing on the cold floor. Outside was that complete darkness of the mountains. No streetlights, no neighbors, nothing. Just the sound of crickets singing, the wind moaning in the pines, and that oppressive feeling of total isolation. But now we've seen it. And now we know who he really is. And now, Philip, now we're going to make him pay for it. I swear to God we will. Philip came to stand beside me, pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the window. I saw his reflection in the glass, and he looked 10 years older than he had been that morning. "Helen, I want to kill him," he whispered, and his voice was so loaded with pain it hurt to hear. "I swear to God, by everything that's sacred, I want to put my hands around his neck and squeeze until he stops breathing. I want to see the life leaving those disgusting eyes of his." His voice broke completely, and he punched the wooden wall next to the window so hard his knuckles bled. "He stole from us, Helen. He stole our wedding night. He stole a moment that was just ours, that should have been sacred, and turned it into... He couldn't finish. He collapsed right there, on his knees on the floor, his forehead against the wall, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I knelt beside him, held his face in my hands, made him look at me. "I want to, too," I said, and I let him see the rage in my eyes, let him see that I was as destroyed as he was. "I want to make him suffer in every possible way, too. But Philip, my love, if we do that, if we hurt him, we'll go to jail. And him? He'll become the victim. He'll appear in the media as the stepfather attacked by ungrateful stepchildren. He'll hire expensive lawyers, he'll sue us, and he'll come out a hero while we rot in jail." I wiped the tears from his face with my thumb, in that caring way I had done 1,000 times before, when we were still innocent, when the world still made sense. "No, sweetheart, we can't let emotion lead now. We need to be smarter than him. We need to use our heads, calculate every step. We need to destroy him the right way, in a way he can never recover from." That's when I started thinking out loud, putting the pieces together like a puzzle. My brain, which had spent hours paralyzed by shock and horror, suddenly began to function with frightening clarity. He's watching us now, at this exact moment. That means there's a live transmission. The cameras aren't just recording on a memory card, they're sending the images in real time somewhere, to some device. Philip, who understood technology, who had studied 4 years of electrical engineering precisely to understand how these things worked, nodded slowly. I saw his mind starting to work too, putting emotion aside for a moment and focusing on the technical part. "There has to be a receiver," he said, his voice still trembling but gaining firmness. "Probably a computer or a private server. And to transmit live video in 1975, you need a very good connection. There's probably a radio system or... wait." He stopped, his eyes widening. "The company where I work just installed one of the first data networks in the region. And Roger, he has connections with the company. He's a civil engineer, works on big projects." Philip went to the bag where he had put the destroyed cameras, picked up the pieces carefully, examined them in the orange light of the fireplace. He turned the little pieces from side to side, studying the exposed circuits, the wires, the solders. "These are IP cameras," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "Cameras that transmit over Wi-Fi or data network. This is cutting-edge technology, Helen. This hasn't even officially arrived in the United States yet. He must have brought it from abroad, probably from Japan or Europe. This costs a fortune." "And can you find out where the transmission is going?" I asked, approaching him, feeling a tiny spark of hope beginning to ignite in the midst of all that despair. Philip bit his lower lip, thinking, calculating. I could see the gears turning in his head. "Maybe," he said after a moment, "if he didn't protect the network properly. And knowing an arrogant man like him, a man who thinks he's untouchable above everyone, he probably didn't worry much about security. He thinks no one will ever find out. He thinks he controls everything." He looked at me, and for the first time that terrible night, in those endless hours of horror, I saw a different gleam in his eyes. It wasn't just rage, it was determination, it was intelligence working. "I have equipment in the car. Some tools the company gave me, network testing devices, signal analyzers. I can try to trace the signal, find out where these cameras are sending the video." While Philip ran out to the Beetle parked in front of the cabin, I heard the door slam, the hurried footsteps on the wooden deck, the creak of the trunk opening. I was left alone in the living room. And it was in that moment, my dear, in that sudden silence after so much chaos, that everything collapsed again. That reality fell on me with the weight of 1,000 tons. I sat on the cold wooden floor, right there in the middle of the living room, hugged my knees to my chest, and started crying in a way I hadn't cried even when my father died, back when I was 7 years old. Because this was different. My father's death had been a terrible accident, a tragedy, but it had been the work of fate, of destiny. This was the work of a man. Of a man I had let into my life, into my family's life. A man I had called father for 12 years. Because this was a violation that went far beyond the body, far beyond the physical. It was a violation of trust, of intimacy, of the very idea of safety and home. It was the destruction of everything I thought I knew about the world. I had let that man hug me. I had accepted his affection, his gifts, his money. I had eaten at his table, lived in his house. I had worn the clothes he bought. And the whole time he was looking at me in that disgusting way, waiting, planning for this moment, counting the days until my wedding, until my honeymoon, until he could see me in the most intimate, most vulnerable way possible. Why me? I sobbed alone there in the dark, my voice echoing off the empty walls. Why did he do this to me? What did I do wrong? How didn't I notice? And then came the worst part. The memories, all of them, passing through my head like a horror movie. All those times I had ignored, rationalized, justified. That way he had of accidentally opening my bedroom door without knocking, always at the strangest times, when I was changing clothes to go to bed, when I was getting out of the shower. And he always apologized, always said, "Oh, forgot to knock, sorry, daughter." But his eyes would linger a second too long before looking away. That way he looked when I came down in the morning in a skirt to go to school, that look that went up my legs and made me want to pull the skirt down, cover myself, but I thought I was imagining things. It's a father's jealousy, I told myself. He's just worried about his daughter's safety. Those times he insisted on picking me up from college alone, without my mother, and on the way back he'd ask strange questions. If I had a boyfriend, if I had kissed someone, if I knew how these things worked. And I, naive, thought he was trying to be a modern father, open to dialogue. The clothes. My God, the clothes he bought me. Always a little too tight, a little too short, a little too low cut. And when my mother complained, he'd say, "But Hortense, the girl has to dress well, has to keep up with fashion." And I wore them because they were pretty, because they were expensive, because I wanted to please. Everything. Everything made sense now, and I felt so stupid, so dumb, so blind. How had I not seen? How had I not realized that man was a monster? I thought about giving up, you know? In that moment of absolute despair, sitting on that cold floor, my body aching from shaking so much, I thought about just picking up the phone, calling the police, telling everything, and leaving it in their hands. Letting the justice system resolve it, washing my hands of it, running away from that nightmare. But then I remembered, Roger had friends in the police. I had seen him having dinner with the sheriff, with the judge, with councilmen, with important people. He'd say the cameras were for security, that he was worried about us alone in the middle of the woods, that there could be thieves, robbers. He'd hire the best lawyers from New York, from D.C. He'd sue us for defamation, for slander. He'd destroy us financially, emotionally, socially, and he'd go free. Free to do this to another girl, to another family, to another victim who would trust him. No, not at all. No way. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, took 3 deep breaths, that deep breathing my grandmother taught me when I was little and had nightmares, and I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I stood up. Philip came back carrying a heavy metal case, full of wires, devices with blinking lights, things I had no idea what they were. He put everything on the living room floor, plugged a device into the wall outlet, and started fiddling with buttons and antennas, adjusting, connecting, building a kind of improvised workstation right there in the middle of the living room. "I'm looking for the cabin's Wi-Fi signal," he explained, his voice returning to that concentrated, technical, professional tone, and I realized he was clinging to that, to the practical solution, to the technology, to the concrete problem he knew how to solve, to keep from going crazy with rage and helplessness. "There are several signals here in the region," he murmured, looking at a small screen showing numbers and names blinking. "But most are very weak. Wait. Got it. Here." He pointed to the screen. "Network, cabin, private. Strong signal. 5 bars. It's right here nearby, inside the house itself." He let out a bitter laugh with no humor at all. Son of a bitch. He didn't even try to hide it. He put the place name on the network. It says private. Private, as if this belonged to him, as if we were his property. Almost an hour passed. A long, torturous hour of Philip, typing things on a device that looked like a small, primitive computer, writing down numbers on a sheet of paper, murmuring technical words I didn't fully understand. IP address, subnet mask, gateway, router, server. I stayed beside him the whole time without interfering, just giving silent support. I went to the kitchen, put water on to boil, made strong, bitter coffee the way my mother taught me. I brought it to him in cups that shook so much in my hand that coffee spilled onto the saucers. He drank without looking, mechanical, his eyes glued to the numbers, the wires, the devices. Until finally, when the sky outside began to lighten with that gray, sad light that comes before dawn, he stopped. He stood completely still. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of triumph and horror. "I did it," he said, his voice hoarse from being silent for so long. "I managed to trace it. The signal is going to IP address 192.168.1.105, which according to the network configuration is a main computer, and this computer is located—" He consulted the papers, checked twice. "It's at 847 Azalea Street, Hot Springs." My heart stopped. Then it raced so fast I thought I was going to faint. "That's his house," I whispered. "Azalea Street, 847. That's the house where I lived. That's the house where my mother lives now." Philip nodded, jaws clenched again. "He's there. He's there now, at this exact moment on his computer, and by the amount of data being transmitted." He checked one of the devices. "He's watching. The transmission is active. It's happening now." I felt a wave of nausea rise, but I swallowed it. Swallowed hard. "He's sitting there," I said, more to myself, visualizing the scene. Alone in his office, that office no one can enter, with the door locked, looking at the screen, waiting for us to go back to the bedroom. Waiting for the show to continue. "Son of a bitch," Philip whispered, and this time the anger in his voice was ice, not fire. It was that cold, calculated, dangerous anger. And that's when, honey, in that moment of absolute clarity, the perfect plan formed in my head. As if God or the universe or whatever had put all the pieces in exactly the right place, at exactly the right time. Crystal clear, simple, brilliant, foolproof. "Philip," I said slowly, approaching him, gripping his shoulders hard, making him look me in the eyes. "Do you still have that cell phone with a camera? That prototype the company gave you to test?" It was brand new technology at the time, my dear ones. Almost nobody had it. A cell phone in 1975 was already rare, but a cell phone with a camera that made video calls, that was science fiction. But the telecommunications company where Philip worked was testing this technology, had imported some devices from abroad, and had given one to Philip to take home, test, give feedback. He nodded, confused. "I do. It's in the glove compartment of the car. Why?" "And this phone can make video calls?" "It can. The quality isn't great, but it works. Why, Helen? What are you thinking?" I took a deep breath. "What if we What if we made a video call now? I was talking faster and faster, ideas stumbling over each other, coming out jumbled but making sense. What if we called the phone at home, the phone in my mother's bedroom? What if we put the cell phone here, right in front of his camera that's still working, hidden somewhere we haven't found? What if we showed my mother, live, Philip, what her husband is doing at this exact moment? Philip looked at me with his mouth open, processing. You want to call your mother? He's home, in the office, alone. My mother is there too, probably in her bedroom, because he always makes her go to bed early when he's working late. If we call her now, wake her up, show her the cameras, show the transmission, explain everything, she'll wake up, she'll believe, and she'll go there. I squeezed his shoulders harder. She'll open that office door, and she'll catch him in the act, red-handed, watching his own daughter. But what if she doesn't believe? Philip asked, and I saw fear mixed with hope in his eyes. What if she thinks we're making up stories? What if she takes his side? I shook my head firmly. She won't, because she'll see it with her own eyes. The transmission will be running. He'll be there, sitting in front of the monitor, watching. She'll see us, her own daughter, on his screen, live. There's no way to deny it, no way to lie. There's no lawyer in the world who can explain that. A heavy silence fell between us. Philip processing, calculating, thinking of all the variables. Finally he said, "What if it goes wrong?" Then we report it the normal way. But Philip, this isn't going to go wrong. This is perfect. We're going to use his own weapon against him, his cameras, his technology, his ego. We're going to turn the game around completely. Philip stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded, determined. I'll get the phone. While he ran out to the car again, I stood there, standing in the middle of that living room, and felt something change inside me. The fear was still there. The disgust was still there. The feeling of violation was still there, and I knew it would be there for the rest of my life. But now there was something else too. There was rage. There was determination. There was power. Because I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I was going to be the hunter. Philip came back with the cell phone, a big, clunky device with a tiny camera on the front and a small green screen. He turned it on, waited for it to load. There's enough battery, he said. And the signal here is good. It'll work. I picked up the cabin's landline phone, that old rotary phone on the entrance table. My hand shook when I started dialing. The number to my house, the number I knew by heart. Each turn of the dial seemed like an eternity. It rang. It rang. It rang. My heart beat to the rhythm of the rings. It rang again, and I thought, she's not going to answer. She's sleeping soundly. This isn't going to work. But on the sixth ring, someone answered. Hello? My mother's sleepy, confused, frightened voice. Helen! My God, what time is it? What happened? Are you okay? Are you both okay? And I, with the firmest voice I could pull from the depths of my soul in that moment, took a deep breath and said, Mom. Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to trust me like you've never trusted me in your life. What I'm going to show you now, what I'm going to tell you, will change everything. Everything, Mom. But I need you to be strong. Can you do that for me? On the other end of the line, I heard my mother breathe deeply, trying to fully wake up, trying to understand why her daughter was calling at that hour of the morning. Helen, you're scaring me, my daughter. What happened? Did you have an accident? Did someone get hurt? No, Mom. We're physically fine. But, Mom, I need to tell you something, and you need to trust me blindly. I looked at Philip, who had turned on the camera phone and was adjusting the angle, pointing to where we thought there was still a hidden camera. Roger, your husband, he installed cameras here in the cabin, hidden cameras, in the bedroom, in the bathroom. He's watching us. He's spying on us. The silence on the other end was so deep I thought the connection had dropped. Then came her voice, low, trembling. What? Helen, what are you saying? That doesn't make sense. Why would he do something like that? Mom, I found 4 cameras. Philip traced the signal. The transmission is going to his office computer. He's there now, at this exact moment, watching. My voice broke, but I forced myself to continue. He sent me a message. He said he was watching everything. He turned our honeymoon into his own private show. I heard my mother sob on the other end, a low, muffled sound, as if she had put her hand over her mouth. No, that can't be true. Helen, are you sure? It could be a mistake. It could be… Mom! I spoke louder, firmer. I have the cameras here in my hand. Philip traced the internet signal. It's not a mistake. It's not a misunderstanding. It's real. And I need you to help me prove it. I need you to go to his office right now. He'll deny it, Helen. He'll say I'm crazy, that you're making it up. Not if you catch him in the act. I looked at Philip, who nodded, showing that the camera phone was ready. Mom, I'm going to make a video call with you. I'm going to show you the cameras. I'm going to show us here. And you're going to take the cell phone to his office. You're going to open that door, and you're going to see him watching his own daughter on the screen. Can you do that? Can you be strong enough to do that? Another long silence. I heard her breathing, heard the creak of her bed when she got up. Is he in the office now? She asked, and her voice had changed. It had become harder, colder. Yes, the transmission is active. Philip confirmed it. Then call me on that new cell phone you gave me for Christmas, the one with a camera. I'm going to catch him. And in that moment, my dear ones, I felt immense pride in my mother. Because she might have been submissive with Roger, might have let herself be controlled all those years, but when it came to protecting her daughter, she was a lioness. Philip dialed my mother's cell phone number, and in seconds, her image appeared on the small green screen, her face illuminated by the bedroom lamplight, red eyes, but determined. Show me, she said. Show me the cameras. Philip pointed his cell phone camera at the pieces of the cameras we had destroyed. He showed the circuits, the lenses, the wires. Then he pointed to the ceiling where one was still intact, hidden in a light fixture we hadn't checked. Its red light blinked in the dark. My mother brought her hand to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Dear God, she whispered. Dear God, what have I done? What did I let into my house? It's not your fault, Mom. None of this is your fault. But now you can end this. Now you can do the right thing. I saw my mother wipe away tears, harden her face, and get up from the bed. She was in a nightgown, hair down, barefoot. I'm going downstairs, she said, her voice trembling but firm. I'm going to the office, and I'm going to open that door. Keep the camera on, Philip instructed. We need to see everything. We need it to be recorded. We watched on the tiny screen as my mother descended the house stairs. Those stairs I had gone up and down thousands of times. The cell phone shook in her hand, showing the dark hallway, the photos on the wall, the carpet that cushioned her steps. She walked slowly, silently, like a ghost. When she reached the office door, she stopped. We could see the dark wooden door, that door that was always locked, that sacred space of Roger's that no one could invade. There was a sliver of light under the door. He was in there, awake, as Philip had said. It's locked, my mother whispered. The door is locked from the inside. Knock, I said. Knock hard. My mother knocked 3 times, loud, authoritative. From the other side, we heard the sound of a chair scraping, hurried footsteps, Roger's irritated voice. Hortense, what is it? I'm working. Open this door now, my mother said, and her voice had nothing submissive anymore. Open it, now. But what's gotten into you, woman? Are you crazy? It's 4 a.m. Open this door immediately, or I'll break it down. Silence. Then the sound of the key turning in the lock. The door opened, and Roger appeared, in a robe, hair disheveled, eyes wide with shock and guilt. What happened? Why are you screaming? But my mother didn't answer. She pushed him aside and entered the office, and the cell phone camera captured everything. It captured the large wooden desk, the scattered papers, the blueprints. And in the corner, glowing in the dimness, the screen of a modern, expensive computer that must have cost a fortune. And on the screen, honey, on the screen was me and Philip, live. Sitting in the cabin living room, looking at the camera, illuminated by the firelight. The image was in black and white, but it was clear. It was undeniable. "What is this?" my mother asked, her voice coming out low, dangerous. "What are you doing, Roger?" Roger turned white. He tried to get between my mother and the computer, tried to close the screen. "It's not what you're thinking. I installed security cameras in the cabin, just to make sure they were safe, that there wouldn't be thieves, robbers." "Security?" my mother screamed, and I had never heard her scream like that in my life. "Security camera in their bedroom? In their bathroom? Do you think I'm an idiot?" Philip pointed our cell phone at the camera that was still active on the ceiling, making our image appear on Roger's computer screen in real time. And my mother saw it, saw the connection, saw the living proof, undeniable, happening in front of her eyes. "Hortense, listen," Roger tried, extending his hand, that honeyed voice he always used to manipulate. But this time, it didn't work. My mother slapped his face so hard the sound echoed through the phone. "Don't touch me! Never again! Never again!" She turned to the phone, her eyes meeting mine through that fragile connection of primitive technology. "Helen, my daughter, get out of there now. Come home. I'm calling the police." "No!" Roger shouted, trying to grab the phone from her hand. "You can't! You have no right! This is my house! But my mother moved away, kept the phone away from him. "Your house? Your house? This house was bought with money my first husband left, that you convinced me to use to invest. This house is mine, and you're leaving here, now." That's when I saw the real Roger for the first time, without the mask, without the veneer of an educated man, of a helpful stepfather. His face contorted in a mixture of rage and despair. "You have no idea what you're doing, Hortense. If you report me, I'll take you down with me. I have lawyers, I have friends. I'll destroy your family." "Go ahead and try," my mother said, and raised the phone, showing that everything had been recorded. "Because now I have proof, and my daughter has the cameras. And when the police arrive, they'll seize that computer, and they'll see everything you did." Roger staggered back as if he'd been punched, because he realized in that moment that he had lost, that the game had turned, that the victim had become the hunter. The police arrived 40 minutes later. It was my mother who called from the living room landline while she kept Roger locked in the office. She pushed a chair against the door and sat there, waiting, still in her nightgown, still with the phone in her hand, recording everything. When the officers entered, she showed them the computer, showed the live transmission, showed the recording on the phone. One of the officers, who knew Roger, who had had dinner at his house, turned green. "Mr. Meadows, this is a serious crime. You'll have to come with us." Roger tried to argue, tried to use his contacts, tried to offer money, but it didn't help. Because there was too much proof, too much technology. Camera filming camera, live transmission, messages on the phone. They took him away in handcuffs. They seized the computer, seized the equipment, sealed the office as a crime scene. And my mother, my strong mother, stood there watching everything, standing, without crying, until the police car disappeared around the corner, taking that monster away. "You can come home now, my daughter," she said on the phone, her voice finally breaking. "It's over. It's over." And we came back. We drove those 3 hours in silence, watching the sun rise over the mountains, holding on to each other, crying and laughing at the same time. Because it was over. We had won. 50 years have passed since that night, my dear ones. 50 years that flew by and at the same time seemed like a lifetime. Today, I'm 72 years old. I live here in Hot Springs. I came back to my hometown and never left. And I can say I built a good life, a life of peace. I married Philip 2 months after that interrupted honeymoon. We didn't want to wait, didn't want to give fear time to consume us. We had a small ceremony, just with close friends, and this time the honeymoon was at a simple inn in Eureka Springs nearby, without any luxury, but with all the love in the world. And it was perfect. It was how it should have been from the beginning. We had 3 children. Walter was born in 1977, 2 years after all that. We gave him my father's name. Then came Hortense in 1979, my mother's name, because she deserved that honor after being so brave. And the youngest, Gerald, was born in 1982, with my brother's name. All 3 grew up strong, healthy, loved. None of them ever suffered what I suffered. That chain was broken. Philip worked at the telecommunications company for 35 years, moved up the ranks, became a manager, retired with a good pension. I taught at a public school for 30 years, teaching children to read and write, and each student was a little piece of hope I planted in the world. We bought a modest but ours house, raised the children with dignity, and there was never a lack of food on the table or love in conversations. Today we have 6 grandchildren who are the light of our lives. They come here every weekend, fill the house with noise and mess, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. The oldest is already in college, studying engineering like his grandfather. The youngest is 6 years old and loves helping me make the caramel sauce, stands right there beside me on the stool, the same way I stood with my mother. As for Roger, he was tried and convicted. He got 8 years in prison for invasion of privacy, unauthorized recording of intimacy, and other crimes the lawyers explained, but I don't remember all the names. He served 6 years, got out for good behavior in 1981. My mother had already divorced him, had recovered the money that was hers, had rebuilt her life alone. She lived another 23 years after that, died in 2004 at 76 years old, peacefully in her bed, surrounded by children and grandchildren. Roger? I never heard from him again. I know he left Hot Springs, that he went to New York or LA. I don't know. And I don't want to know. He became dust in my memory, a shadow that has no more power over me. The first years were difficult, I won't lie. I had nightmares. I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking someone was watching me. Philip would hold me, calm me down, remind me I was safe. I went to therapy, something that was rare at the time, expensive, but we made the effort and paid because I needed it. It took time, but I healed. Not completely, because some scars never fade, but enough to live well, to be happy, to raise my children without passing my trauma to them. My life today is simple and it's beautiful. I wake up early, make coffee, take care of my plants. Twice a week I go to the thermal baths for water aerobics with other ladies my age. We laugh, gossip, complain about aching joints. I make my caramel sauce, sell it to neighbors and to shops downtown. I embroider my dish towels watching soap operas. I receive my grandchildren on weekends. I have dinner with Philip every night, and then we sit on the couch holding hands watching television until we get sleepy. It's a common life, a life many people find boring. But for me, after everything I went through, this common life is a miracle. It's proof that I won, that I didn't let that man destroy my future, that I was stronger, smarter, braver than he expected. Sometimes I think about that night in July 1975. I think about how I could have given up, run away, let him win. But I didn't. And that strength I found in that moment has stayed with me my whole life. It taught me that I'm capable of facing anything, that I deserve respect, that I deserve peace. And today, here in my warm kitchen, with the smell of caramel sauce in the air and the sound of birds outside, I can say from my heart, I'm happy, I'm whole, I won. You know what that night taught me, my dear ones? It taught me that the monster always counts on our silence. He counts on us being ashamed, on us thinking no one will believe us, on us swallowing the violation and pretending everything's fine. And that's exactly why we can't stay silent. I could have run away from that cabin and never touched the subject again. I could have let fear paralyze me. But I chose to use his weapon against him. He thought technology would dominate me, but I used it to destroy him. And that taught me that we always have power, even when it seems we don't. If you're going through something similar, if someone is watching you, controlling you, making you feel that your body and your life aren't yours, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. You're not alone. And you're not to blame. No matter how many times he said it was for your protection, that it was because he loves you, that it was normal. It's not. It never was. It never will be. That hidden camera taught me that intimacy is sacred. That when someone violates that, they're not just taking privacy, they're taking dignity, security, the right to exist without being watched. But it also taught me that we can recover that. It may take years, it may leave a scar, but we recover. I learned that trusting again is possible. I married Philip, had children, built a family. The cameras didn't win, Roger didn't win, I won, and you can win too. Seek help. Talk to someone you trust. It could be your mother, your friend, a teacher, anyone. In your country, look for protection authorities, victim support services. They exist, and they'll listen to you. Save evidence if you can, messages, photos, anything. The technology that hurt you can be the same that saves you. And if you know someone going through this, believe them. It was my mother believing me that changed everything. One person believing is enough to start the turnaround. My dear ones, I'm here today, happy, whole, because I didn't let him define me. And you don't have to either. The story doesn't end with trauma. The story continues, and it can be beautiful. Now I need you all. If you watched until here, if this story touched your heart, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales right now. Hit that bell. Because there are so many people who need to hear that it's possible to win, that it's possible to be happy again. And the more people hear it, the more lives we can change. And do me a favor? Write here in the comments just one word. I won. Just that. I won. So I know you understood the message, that you're on my side in this fight. Do it now. Don't wait even one more minute. Because each comment is a chain of strength we create together. Thank you for listening to me, my loves. May God bless each and every one of you.